and we're having this conversation. We're in Woodmead today, just north of Johannesburg. We're talking about financial liberation, financial inclusion, and how we can get to that point for the majority of our people as quickly as we can, because there are a lot of people getting left behind. And one interesting statistic that's not talked about often is, whilst there's this inequality between black and white, it's huge, we know this, but the inequality amongst black people themselves is growing as the years go by. So we need to address that. As black people, some are being empowered, others are getting further and further left behind. So we'll continue to have this conversation. Hashtag TNA Biz Brief at Morning Live SABC. We also have an audience here. I'm going to be getting their questions as well. But just before the break, we got contributions from three panelists. Sifiso, your thoughts before we start opening this conversation up. One of the things I'm struck by, during apartheid, without access to finance, one of the areas that we did really well in was retail. We were able to set up shops and so on and so forth. And I'm surprised that 24 years later, we don't have huge retail stores owned by black people, like Nakumatt in Kenya. Why is that?
Well, for one, I think that in the past, black people worked at retail. I'm not sure how much of retail they owned, because if there was any retail they owned at all, it would have translated into the new democracy. But it didn't, because there is vanguarding. And perhaps the issue of the banks is true in light of business as well, because it's very difficult for black entrepreneurs to get into the market space, to get into malls, because of the vanguards, those who guard the industry against those young people or perhaps older people who want to enter the industry. So that's the first thing we must deal with. But even as a country, I think in 2017, we must look at ourselves beyond the threats of our economy. And the South African rand has been run under threats. Every time someone had an opinion to say, let us become radical to transformation, or let us talk about issues of financial inclusion, someone came and said, oh no, don't have that conversation, because Moody's will give us a downgrade, because this country's rand will drop, will be downgraded. What happened when we found out that even Moody's was faking audits, and they were not even true? So we must continue to walk on eggshells, because we are afraid that the rand will drop, investors will not come to South Africa. Black people in this country don't even own the rand, for that matter. When it drops, it doesn't drop for them. So we mustn't talk about threats all the time to say people should not act or should not speak, because if you speak, you'll break the eggshells. We cannot run an economy through threats to say, if you make this move, this will happen.
But
it is in light of development, we must speak out and say there must be radical transformation and there must be financial inclusion. And when we talk about radical development, Peter, the gloves come off. It's going to be a messy thing. Media corporations are going to get involved. Some people are not going to like it. Those who control interest and those who have control power of the rand, you'll be setting the cat among the chickens, and things will get untidy. But that's what radical means. And this is something that should have happened 25 years ago, 22 years ago. The gloves should have come off, but we've been walking on eggshells because you did not want to tick someone off. You did not want to create an enemy of a neighbor whom you say you love. There cannot be tolerance and action until there are issues of justice. And the first act of justice is to talk about transformation and financial inclusion. I cannot start a race 20 kilometers ahead of you. And then I claim that at the finish line we're going to get there first. That will be an unfair description.
Let me ask you this. If this country is 80% black, that means, in theory, you've got an opportunity to help each other out of poverty. So if I need a lawyer, I should go and get a black lawyer. If I need a doctor, I should go and get a black doctor. Why aren't we doing this? Why aren't we supporting ourselves? Because if we did that, we wouldn't be having this conversation, Andile?
Absolutely. The Buy Black campaign is very important, but we must not have historical amnesia. South Africa's problems are historically created, and we can't avoid state intervention and state policy. We must go to black doctors, we must use black lawyers, we must buy from black. But somebody asked me the question about this Buy Black. Okay, you buy these goods from a black person. Who did they get this stuff from? Yes. You see, we are still trapped because what we become, we just sellers of products which are actually produced by white companies. So we become salesmen and women for white capital. This is true even for books, everything. So long as the economy is still in the hands of white people, we become peripheral players. We become vulnerable. They can come and take our business when they want. So the big question first, South Africa remains a white supremacist country controlled by white people. We are excluded. What we need is a government which works for black people. If we don't do that, we're going to sit with the situation like we are now, where we're excluded from our own. It's a shocking thing. We're a powerless majority. We have the majority, but we are powerless because we've been excluded from the economic system by a policy which was systematic. We need policy intervention which is systematic.
Okay, let's get the thoughts of our audience here and you at home. Let's go to table number 3, where Sabelo Dlamini is sitting.
Morning, Peter.
Good morning to you.
Analyst, as well as audience. I'm not going to talk about the state of FSB registering some other companies.
All right, we're having an issue with your microphone. I don't know if there's another one that we can give you. Let's just...
Maybe I put it wrong?
No, the PA is working, but it's not going through the desk. All right, let's try that one.
I was saying with the issue of FSB deregistering some other financial sectors, I'm not apologetic about that. I'm just going past that one because the financial sector, if I did not...
All right, can you just, sorry, let me just interrupt you because we just want to make sure people at home can hear you. And the guys on the desk, if you could just open that mic a little bit further, just boost the volume.
I must put it closer.
And yeah, okay.
I was just passing that one said by your panelist because if I did not move from the financial sector, I should be very much poor by this time because of the policies that they've designed. South Africa is in a democracy. The word democracy means many, I think. And if it's not democracy, at this point in time in South Africa, I'm confused or maybe tempted to change the name to democracy. My question, as it listed on your picture, is maybe for the government to try to reduce the powers of these banks, they must start to fund these national empowerment funds of South Africa, so that also these black people, black businesses that are around South Africa should be surely empowered by that fund because banks are owned elsewhere. They will never be supportive to the South Africans. We are many, we need to get as many as or as much as possible in terms of funds. So that is the only way of economic transformation. Thank you.
So you want to reduce the power of banks or have more banks and...
The power of banks, Peter, before you finish, sorry. The power of banks should remain with the owners. But the power of blacks must be owned by the government through the funds that will be accessible to the South Africans. Thank you.
Isn't government lending people money? We've got funds. We've got, these institutions whose job it is to lend money favorably to black entrepreneurs. Aren't these institutions there already? Thank you.
I'm not... I couldn't speak with absolute clarity on the matter, but I will tell you one thing. Government, I don't know whether it has Kula or it had it, I don't know. But you'd go to Kula, which was supposedly a government institution, ask for money from Kula, and they refer you to the financial banks. And they demand the same things. There would be absolutely no assistance to you as a small business person in accessing that money. You go back to APSA. APSA demands, they want the security, they want everything that they want normally. So we have these, I call them fronts. You know, you go to the National Empowerment Fund. When you try to access that money, it's simply impossible for a black person who has no, you know, who is trying to, startups and so forth. Ultimately, the people who have more money, who have more loans from those empowerment funds will probably be white people.
Leon, how do we fix this? Because the Act forces the banks to do a due diligence. They have to show that this person's fit and proper. If you have nothing to start with, they are stopped from lending you money. How do we fix this?
You know, it's hard to believe this, but if a white racist wanted to make sure that you keep black people down financially, you would have come up with the National Credit Act. Basically what it says is all black South Africans and all low-income people of any race, doesn't matter, I mean we talk a lot about race here, but we should talk about economics, are what would be called reckless lending under our law. In other words, our law says you may not lend to people who need money. You may lend only to people who don't need money. That's what the law actually says, and that's a new South Africa law. It forces you to lend money to people who don't need it. I literally got a call from my bank after the National Credit Act was passed, within 6 months, saying, Mr. Louw, you are under-borrowed. Wouldn't you like more money? Don't you want to build a swimming pool, a tennis court? I live in a flat, but nonetheless I was going to build a swimming pool.
But the other side of that is that the banks will sit with a lot of impaired debt.
But you know, that's their money. You just understand this. If you think that it's white monopoly capital that owns these banks, and that's another debate, but let's put it aside for now, and they lend their money to black people to play the race card who don't pay them back, we should be pleased about that. It means the money's gone from the banks to the people. So there's nobody who's going to think more carefully about who to lend money to than the person lending the money. We don't need a national credit regulator to be sitting over there saying, don't lend to people who need money. That's what the law says. Let's be very clear about that. We here in this room need to understand that in the new South Africa, we have passed legislation that says, do not lend to black people, even if you want to.
Okay.
That is what the law says. And if you want to know what causes financial exclusion, repeal the Financial Services Act and the National Credit Act, which are aimed at keeping black people down. Now, just I want to make this observation, that when you spoke earlier about the inequality within the black community growing, you're right. The inequality within the black community is now bigger than the inequality as between white and black people. But it's not bad. You must understand it's because black people have moved up. The poor people have not gone down. It's just that more and more, you want a society in which more and more people move up. Now, let me put it very simple arithmetic. If everyone has 100 Rand and 5 people get 200 Rand, you've got increased inequality. If some people move across from the poor side of the field to the rich side of the field, you have more inequality. That's actually what you want. You want people to move up. Our national credit laws and our financial services laws in South Africa perpetuate the past more than anything else we can possibly imagine. Now, let me make another point. We also have to understand what growth achieves. I know that that's not a popular conversation because it's abstract economics, but let me give you some simple arithmetic. If you grow at 7%, the rate of Mauritius, Botswana, China, India, Ghana, Tanzania, if you grow at the rate that more and more African countries are growing at, your wealth would be 4 times more since 94. 4 times, 400% more wealthy would be South Africa. If you grow at 1%, it takes you 140 years. If you grow at 7%, it takes you 20 years. So if we grow at the rate we're growing at now, we are doomed to perpetual poverty. If you want to become wealthy, if you want financial liberation, if you want financial inclusion, You have to start by being rich. You can't be rich without being rich. It's really that simple. And let me just mention Andile's number about 35,000 people own 80% of the land. We need to understand what that is. That 80% is farms. White-owned commercial farms, as the minister said. That land, those farms, is worth almost nothing to black South Africans. It's 90 billion rand is the total value. The value of all land in South Africa is something like 10 trillion. That's 1/100th of the land. What we need to do is say, how do you get people to own the land that matters, which is where we are now? Not the farms. The farms are actually, you can get rid of all the farms and it'll make no difference to the South African economy.
Okay.
It's the land where we are now, the commercial land, the residential land, the business land, the city land, the towns, the villages. That's the land that matters. That's the land where you can bring about empowerment and transformation. And that's the land which is neglected.
Okay, well, let's take a quick break. Quick response from you after that. Stay with us. Hashtag TNA BizBrief at Morning Live SABC. What are your thoughts?